Books of accounts is a set of books or records. It is the finance ledgers, records, and journals that contains all the company's accounts. Books of accounts serves as the financial memory since it contains all the business transactions and financial information. Books of accounts is important in decision making and in analysis of the business performance. And aside from that, it is also crucial in regulatory compliance. There are two major books of accounts, the journal and the ledger. The journal is the chronological record of all business transactions, and it is referred to as the book of original entry. Before we proceed, let's tackle about first the significance of the journal. First, it shows the chronological order of the business transactions. Second, it discloses the full effect of each transactions per entry. Third, it serves as the check and balance tool of the company.
There are two types of journal. One of these is the general journal. The general journal is the most basic type of journal. All business transactions recorded in chronological order. And the general journal displays first the date, a transaction's date, the account title and explanation, the references, and the last is the respective amounts of corresponding accounts.
This is an example of general journal. The date of the transaction is entered in the date column. The debit account title, that is the account to be debited, is entered first at the extreme left margin of the column headed Account Titles and Explanation, and the amount of the debit is recorded in debit column. The credit account title, that is the account to be credited, is indented and entered on the next line in the column headed Account Titles and Explanation, and the amount of the credit is recorded in the credit column. A brief explanation of the transaction, which appears on the line below the credit account title. A space is left between journal entries. The blank space separates individual journal entries and makes the entire journal easier to read. The column title reference, or ref, which stands for reference, which is left blank when the journal entry is made. This column is used later when the journal entries are transferred to the ledger accounts.
Some businesses encounter voluminous quantities of similar and recurring transactions that may lead to congestions if recorded repeatedly in a single day or month in a general journal. So in order to facilitate the efficient and practical recording of very similar and recurring transactions, a special journal is used. There are four kinds of special journal. First is the sales journal, which is used in journalizing all sales of merchandise on account. Second is the cash receipt journal, which is used in journalizing all cash received by the business. Third is the purchases journal, which is used in journalizing all purchases of merchandise on account. Fourth is the cash disbursement journal, which is used in journalizing all cash paid by the business.
This is an example of a sales journal. The date of the transaction is entered in the date column. A brief explanation of the transaction is entered in the description column or the name of the customer. The column titled Ref, which stands for reference, is left blank when the journal entry is made. The column is used later when the journal entries are transferred to the ledger accounts. The charge invoice number or sales invoice number represents the identifying number of the source document issued to the customer when the sale was made. The debit accounts receivable column represents the amount of the sale transactions indicated in the charge invoice. The credit sales column represents the amount of the sale transactions indicated in the charge invoice. The source document of this journal is the charge invoice issued by the business. Next is the cash receipt journal. The date of the transaction is entered in the date column. A brief explanation of the transaction is entered in the description column. Again, the column titled Ref stands for reference, which is left blank when the journal entry is made. This column is used later when the journal entries are transferred to the ledger accounts. The debit cash column represents the amount of cash received for a particular transaction. Major categories of receipts such as cash sales and collection of accounts receivable are provided with separate columns. These transactions are frequent and repetitive items, therefore a separate column is provided. The column sundry is used for various miscellaneous and less regular items such as capital investment, receipt of loan proceeds, among others. The source document for this journal is the official receipts or cash receipts issued by the business. The third example of a special journal is the purchases journal. The date of the transaction is entered in the date column. A brief explanation of the transaction is entered in the description column or the name of the supplier. The column titled Ref again starts for reference, which is left blank when the journal entry is made. This column is used later when the journal entries are transferred to the ledger accounts. The charge invoice number or sales invoice number represents the identifying number of the source document issued by the supplier when the items, goods, or merchandise were delivered to the company when the purchase was made. The debit purchases column represents the amount of the goods purchases as indicated in the charge invoice from the supplier. The credit accounts payable column represents the amount of the goods or items purchased on credit from the supplier. The amount is indicated in the charge invoice issued by the supplier. The source document for this journal is the charge invoice from the supplier or vendor. And last but not the least, among the special journals is the cash disbursement journal. The date of the transaction is entered in the date column. A brief explanation of the transaction is entered in the description column. The column titled Ref stands for reference, which is left blank when the journal entry is made. This column is used later when the journal entries are transferred to the ledger accounts. The check or voucher number represents the identifying number of the check issued for the related cash payment. Most of the time, a check or cash voucher accompanies the disbursement. The voucher number may be used as the alternative for this column. The debit cash column represents the amount of cash received for a particular transaction. Major categories of receipts such as cash sales and collection of accounts receivable are provided with separate columns. These transactions are frequent and repetitive items, therefore a separate column is provided. The column sundry is used for various miscellaneous and less regular items such as capital investment, receipt of loan proceeds, among others. The source documents used to update this journal are the check voucher or cash voucher, cash receipts, or official receipts from suppliers or vendors.
Ledger. Ledger is an accounting book wherein the accounts and the related amounts recorded in the journal is posted periodically. The basic form of ledger is like a letter T. That's why it was referred to as the T account. Also, ledger is a book of final entry because all the balances of the ledger are used in the preparation of the financial statements.
The two types of ledger. First is the general ledger. General ledger is the grouping of all of accounts used in the preparation of financial statement. It is also a controlling account, which summarizes all activities that have taken place as recorded and as a statutory ledger.
And this is the example of general ledger. This is the parts of general ledger. First is the account portion, which refers to the account title. For example, cash and account receivable. Second is the account number, which is an assigned number for each account title to facilitate ease in recording and cross-referencing. Then the date column identifies when the transaction happened. The fourth is the item, which represents the source journal and the nature of transaction. Then the reference, identifies the page number of a general or special journal from which the information was taken. Then, the debit and credit columns are used in recording the amount of transaction from a general journal or special journal. And then the last is the balance column, which represents the running balance of the account after considering the debit and credit amount. If the running balance amount is positive, the account has a debit balance, whereas if it is a negative running balance, the account has a credit balance.
Subsidiary ledger is a group of accounts with similar characteristics. It is also an additional record to the general ledger, utilized by the company to track the individual accounts of the company's customers, creditors, and the like. And there is two common types of subsidiary ledger. The first, account receivable ledger, is used mainly to track the individual account balances of the company's customers. And the second, account payable ledger, is used in tracking individual accounts payable balances of company's creditors.
This is the example of subsidiary ledger. These are the parts of subsidiary ledger. First, the date column, which identifies when the transaction happened. And then the description column, describe the nature of transaction. Third, reference column, identifies the page number of the general or special journal from which the information was taken. And the fourth, debit and credit columns, reflect the various effects of every transaction to the record of supplier or vendor. And then, the balance column provides the running balance of every supplier. Take note that the total running balance for all subsidiary ledger should equal the accounts receivable and payable general ledger. For further information, if we will make an account payable subsidiary ledger, the upper portion shows the supplier or vendor's name, its address, and vendor's number at the upper right. If we will make an account receivable subsidiary ledger, the upper portion shows the customer's name, its address, and customer's number at the upper right.
So, we believe in the saying that accountants are magicians! Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something.
I got the magic in me. Every time I touch that track, it turns into gold.